It's like alternative medicine and sort of, the wellness industry and Grift. It's not just a set of unsupported treatments or just a set of pseudoscientific treatments. Like, it's not just energy healing or homeopathy or naturopathy. It's this, like you said, it's an entire narrative, and it's an ideology that has its own themes and ideas, its own propaganda tactics. And the whole point of that is to sow distrust in mainstream medicine. And it needs that polarizing, divisive narrative to set itself against mainstream medicine, because that's what's required to sell its grift, so to speak. And anyone can know this by just Googling a local alternative medicine website, because you'll see some of these tropes. Like, you'll see something like, you'll see on their websites, you'll see words and languaging that says, unlike mainstream medicine, who just cover the main symptoms or just treat, or they just mask the symptoms, we treat the root cause. But then when you dig deeper, you'll see that the root cause is a false cause. It's a pseudoscientific cause. It's like your unbalanced energy blockages, or it's a diet deficiency that is unsupported or pseudoscientific. And then they're going to sell you cures for that stuff. And so, yeah, it's that science and that narrative. So that pseudoscience and that narrative has become heavily politicized. And it's very concerning when it seeps and becomes baked into our healthcare systems at large. That is what I've been rallying against for, again, like you said, for 5 years, because I think ultimately that threatens patient care at the individual level and undermines public health at a population level.
What is, I'm a big fan of definitions. I think sometimes we motor through conversations with information after reading a book where you and I can have a conversation, but a lot of people might fall off on the side. What is pseudoscience to you?
Yeah, so pseudoscience, it's a loaded term, but I'll try to make it palatable.
Yeah.
So basically it's fake science. It's a hijacked attempt at doing science, but it's wrong. It's fake. And so in the history of philosophy of science, people have been wrestling with this problem about how to separate actual science from pseudoscience. That problem in the history and philosophy of science is known as the demarcation problem. It means, where do we draw the line or demarcate between science and pseudoscience? And the answer to that question is that there is no single criterion that tells us whether we've stumbled upon science or pseudoscience. Rather, there's a cluster or a constellation of warning signs. And the more warning signs that we see and that we hear, that tells us that we've unearthed something pseudoscientific. So for example, some of those warning signs are things like elevating anecdotal evidence or testimonials saying this treatment works because Bob or Karen said so. It's having claims that are divorced from the scientific literature broadly. So for example, energy healing will say that it's a treatment like Reiki will say that this treatment works because we all have human energy fields around us, and that can be manipulated and balanced with our hands.
Is that the chakra one? Is that the one where you see the videos online on social media, which always make me laugh, by the way, where someone's standing over someone on a massage table and they're pulling a pretend string, yes, and then their entire back goes into the downward dog or the scorpion, and you're like, wow, that is incredible. Is that what you're talking about? Is that energy healing?
Yes, that's exactly what that is. And
all right, always makes me laugh. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's another pseudoscientific warning sign. So
I figured.
All that to say, in my book, I got 9 of these warning signs, and so yeah, that's one of them. Just it's pure, it's fake science and it's grift. And then you mentioned something which is really kind of dangerous and insidious, is that the idea that there's these pseudoscientific journals. So that means there are journals that look like science.
They wrap them up in the same kind of like digital duotang that you would see, like a logo for a hospital. It's really just an organization, and then they'll make it look like. And dude, my favorite ones are the ones with all the peer-reviewed studies from people that are totally not capable of doing or reading a peer-reviewed study, right? Yes. Because a peer-reviewed study means a peer in the medical profession can read something that the layman cannot. Like someone without, and these are laymen that are like, I just read this peer-reviewed study, and I'm like, A, that's not a peer-reviewed study because you can clearly understand it, and B, it comes from the Department of Freedom and Education in some country in Europe, right? You know what I mean?
That's exactly right. So then you'll see studies that say things like demonic possession is a cause for schizophrenia. and it'll be wrapped up in a peer-reviewed journal. So like it has an introduction and a method section and like a discussion, and it's absurd. It's totally absurd. Or like there's another one that I write in the book.
Yeah, I want your favorites. That's what I want. I want like Dr. Jonathan Stea's greatest hits when it comes to the hilarity of wrapped up pseudoscience.
So my number one all time was the one I mentioned, the demonic possession for schizophrenia, and I'm happy I exposed that, and I'd like to think that I played some part in getting that article retracted, because it was eventually retracted, and I think it's because there was a lot of heat for it. There's another one that I mentioned is there's a journal called Explore, and this is a pseudoscientific journal, and it pretends to be a randomized controlled trial that evaluates whether people can send positive vibes, whatever the hell that means, to water and make its ice crystals look more beautiful. They're just sending vibes. So like, and this, again, it has a methods and a results section and a discussion. And then what that does, why it's so dangerous is that, wellness grifters and alternative medicine practitioners.
By the way, I'm laughing at this. It's not dangerous to me because I love these stories. Continue. So why it's so dangerous? Yes.
It's dangerous because grifters can then say, hey, look, I got a journal article that's supporting my bullshit, so to speak.
Yeah.
Here it's science. And for people that don't understand and they're not able to understand that that's pseudoscience and not science, that's what makes it dangerous. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to teach people what's called science literacy skills so that they can actually be able to tell that that's pseudoscientific bullshit, so to speak, and that it's not real science.
Yeah, triggers, right? Like you're trying to give people a little bit of a roadmap to go, hey, you can need to delineate or demark between what is evidence-based science and what is pure unadulterated bullshit wrapped up to look like science.
Yeah, because sending positive vibes to water to make it look beautiful is
not work. No, doesn't work. Can I share with you a couple of my favorites? These are the ones that I mocked more voraciously the most. Of course, ivermectin, knowing it's an anti-parasitic and doesn't do anything for your lungs. My God, that made me laugh for a solid 2 years. The dirt pills, the oxygenated mud bog dirt pills that people were selling. There's a Canadian dude that was selling. Did you see that? You see the dirt pill guy?
I probably did at one point. There's so many I can't even keep track.
What are some of your favorite elixirs? Oh, and the urine drinkers of Canada too. That was maybe one of my favorite Facebook stumbles over the past couple of years.
There was a naturopath, which I wrote about in BC, and he was manufacturing pills made from his nephew's feces in his basement and selling it as a cure for autism. And it made mainstream news in Canada, and then he got disciplined for it. Thank God, because it was.
Was he a real doctor, or is he just some dude that was selling his?
He's a naturopath. He was a licensed naturopath. So the regulatory body of naturopaths had to discipline him. And then his lawyer, the best thing about this, because I call out a lot of naturopath in my book, because I think it's based on pseudoscience. So the lawyer said, well, how can we keep them accountable? Because the entire profession is based on pseudoscience. So they don't really have an argument to discipline him, because the whole field is pseudoscience. So how can we say that what he's doing is wrong? So it was a fascinating take, but they did end up disciplining him, mostly because it was very unsafe. Like he was just doing it out of his basement with his nephew's feces to treat autism. Like it's just absurd.
What you're saying as a clinical psychologist and a professor, someone like a skilled medical professional with a PhD, you're saying that does not work. You cannot cure autism with poop. Is that what you're saying?
Not yet.
Imagine if one day we get to the point where we can, and that guy's like on his deathbed. It's like, I knew it.
Well, you know what, Dean? It's weird because there's a body of research that does, like, they look at fecal transplants for the treatment of other conditions, but autism isn't there yet. And autism is a very contentious, like everyone purports to be able to treat and cure autism, and the fact is that I think when people say that, it's a very stigmatizing thing, and most often these treatments are incredibly dangerous, and they are backed by no evidence whatsoever.